Very good day, everybody. This is week 5 of ethics, one answer and one case study. The question that has been picked up is from UPSC 2018, and the question is on public interest. It's a comparatively straightforward question in which you need to understand the meaning of public interest clearly. The question is, what is meant by public interest? What are the principles and procedures to be followed by the civil servants in public interest? Now, as you notice, there are two components to the question. First, you have to define what is public interest. Second, you have to tell what are the principles and procedures to be followed by civil servants in public interest. Let's look at the meaning. Public interest is the welfare or well-being of the general public. Public interest means any government action directed to protecting and benefiting citizens at large. Public interest is at the heart of democratic governance. Now, very, very obviously, public, people, all the citizens, any action by the government, it could be anything, for example, a government scheme, a government policy, or a law framed by the legislature. Everything that the government does, keeping the public in mind, is public interest. And as I said, it could be any action of the government. Could be framing of a law, could be implementing a law, could be a welfare scheme, could be a policy. And public, that the governments will keep public interest in mind, is at the heart of any democratic governance or democratic polity. This is how one can begin the answer. And because the question expects you to define public interest. So we start with the definitions. I repeat, we say these two or three things: that any government action directed for the benefit of the general public, keeping the public in mind. Could be legislation, could be implementation of a law, could be a welfare scheme, could be a policy, or any other government action. Meaning public interest also establishes the trust between the government and the public. And then the principle and procedures is the second part of the question. Broadly, we find there are 5 principles in public interest that need to be followed, and the procedures are inbuilt in the principles, meaning thereby that the principles are kept in mind. The procedure gets established by itself. Now we have 4 here. One is the principle of participation. Now, participation, very, very obviously, it's the foundation of power in a democratic polity. People participate in electing their representatives. People participate in everything that a democratic government does. Or at least theoretically, they are supposed to be part of everything in a democratic polity. The second is the principle of charity, that the resources of the government are also the resources of the people, meaning that the government collects resources from the people and spends them on the people. The third is the principle of subsidiarity. Subsidiarity meaning decisions in public interest should be taken as close as possible to the public, meaning thereby that you can't decide what will happen in a village sitting in Delhi, meaning the union government can't decide what people on the ground level want. So the subsidiarity is also about local governance that take decisions because they are meant for the people, take them as close as to the people as possible. Then we have the principle of autonomy, that people have their own sets of values and those values should be respected by the government. The government should not impose its own values on the people. And finally, the principle of transparency. All the other principles fall flat if governments are not transparent, if governments are not open, if governments uh, don't explain to the people what they are doing, if people don't understand what governments are doing, everything else falls flat. And obviously, from these principles, it emerges that public interest is a criterion of legitimation of power. Legitimate power or authority in a democratic polity comes from the people, and that is why public interest is one of the basic criteria of legitimate power or authority, especially in a democratic polity. And of course, this is the primary duty of a civil servant, keeping the public interest in mind. Meaning, service above self. I am secondary, what I am doing is primary, and what I am doing at the primary level, I have because I am doing it for the public. The public interest has to become kept in mind, meaning that the procedures that I follow should be fair and transparent. Or to take it further, they should be fair, they should be equitable, they should be open, they should be transparent, and they should be clearly understood. Now, the question expectedly will be for about 150 words, and taking two parts of the question together, 150 words get covered very, very easily. As I said, it's a comparatively straightforward question, provided you know the basics of the meaning of public interest and the principles and procedures involved. A conclusion can end with a quotation. If you don't know a quotation, you can simply say that public interest, as has been stated earlier, is at the heart of governance, and without public interest, there cannot be legitimate governance. I've given two quotations. The second one seems, in fact, more apt. Even if you don't remember the exact quotation, you can say that it has been said that when a nation or a government looks after the general welfare, it can keep the individual interests of people as secondary. The public interest becomes primary, and this is the basic duty of the government. Moving from here to the case study. The case study has been taken from 2016. It's again a rather straightforward case study. I have divided it into paragraphs for it to be easily understood. It says that Saraswati was a successful IT professional in the USA. She was very patriotic, wanted to do something for the country. She comes back to India and with some friends forms an NGO to serve a poor rural community, to set up a school offering education, good quality education at a very, very nominal cost. A very noble idea by a very patriotic Indian who gives up a job abroad, comes to India, sets up an NGO, wants to provide quality education to poor people who can hardly afford it otherwise. Fits into the idea of the RT Act itself. But then once she tries to do all these things, she discovers that multiple government agencies are involved. She has to run from point A to point B to get permissions. The rules and procedures are not very easily understandable. There are multiple delays. The government officials hardly show any interest. There are demands for bribes. And she and many others, because of all these, are often sort of not very keen to do something in this country, even if it is for the welfare of the poor. Then the case study goes on to say that a measure of government control over voluntary social work is necessary. That, of course, can't be disputed. The government has to keep a check on voluntary social work. But it should not be exercised in a coercive and corrupt manner. Again, there is no dispute there. And then the case study asks you a very straightforward thing, that what measures can you suggest to ensure that due control is exercised, but well meaning, honest NGO efforts are not thwarted? You have to pick up your answer from here. One, as I have said earlier, very, very obviously, a measure of government control over voluntary social work is necessary. That is why we have the Societies Registration Act or the Indian Trust Act and so on and so forth. But it should not be exercised in a coercive and corrupt manner. Now, if you notice, the case study is only asking you for your suggestions, nothing more, nothing less. It is not asking you to go into the ethical aspects. It is not asking you what are the issues involved and so on and so forth. Simply suggestions based on the language of the case study. My suggestions would be, obviously, I'll start by saying that regulation is necessary, but it should be fair and transparent. And then I will say, because there is issues of delays and because there are issues of corruption, because there are issues that laws and rules and regulations are not clearly understood, because there are questions of bribes, I would recommend a single window system that anybody wanting to set up an NGO for any purpose whatsoever can just go to a single window and sort out everything that there is to be sorted out instead of running from one department to the other. Second, because bribery and harassment are involved, I would talk about reduction in human interface, go online to the extent possible. All the routine things can be done online without having to approach a government office. And where human interface is absolutely necessary, post officials who are familiar with the non-governmental sector, and if they are familiar, it can be expected that they will be empathetic, they will understand, and they will try to help. And then the department or wherever the single window is established should have a clear and very easy to understand citizen charters that if you are coming to us, this is what you can expect from us. This is what we'll do in so and so time. This is the quality of service we'll provide. And the department would be expected to stick to the promises it makes. And finally, I would suggest that have a responsive grievance redress system, that if somebody has a grievance, it should be clearly defined that if you have a problem, go there. There should be deadlines that the grievance, if any, will be redressed in so and so time, without the person having the grievance having to run around or approach government officials over and over again. As I said, a rather straightforward case study. In fact, as I've said earlier, a rather straightforward question and a rather straightforward case study. And as usual, one would expect you to practice the ethics questions and a case study given to you by IASbaba. Keep doing that, and all the best. Thank you very much.